This is our continuing conversation on race, culture, and the church. And I am again pleased to be in the presence, in the company of my dear friend, Dr. David Nystrom. Its resume speaks for itself. But at the top of the list, at least I hope, is my friend. So that's in Western Seminary Professor, North Park, Viola, Fuller, blah, 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 blah. But my friend, and we continue to talk about where we're at in this process. And I was laying in bed this morning just thinking about what we've been talking about, where we are. And, often you probably shared it with me when I was a student, you were the professor, about how the Old Testament could serve as flyover country for us if we're not careful. And we want to hurry up and, Genesis 1:1 in the beginning. Now let's hurry up and get to the benefits of salvation and let's live our lives and miss several millennia of refinement, I guess I'm saying. And you had brought up, Dr. David, just the place where we're at. We have this conflation of pandemic, economy, and social dysfunction, social, racial, cultural dysfunction. And I don't know, that's not the Old Testament, what it is, in terms of just the issues, maybe not all at once, but there were times of disease and pestilence. There was times of obvious upheaval and conflict. There were times of great famine and, the lack of, bad economy, for lack of a better word. So share your thoughts, even where you're at in terms of just desiring, I guess that's why we cheat when we read a book that's really good. We want to get to the last chapter. The end. Now you can go back to chapter 1 and enjoy the book. That's not how the author intended it. That's not how the author intended it. So, Doctor.
Well, time of obviously of intense dislocation, which often reveals stuff that's broken underneath. So I have a 20-year-old car sitting out in the parking lot, which has some, there's some fender benders that I haven't corrected, but actually it in some ways it looks way better on the outside than it really is on the inside. And I think that's maybe always a feature of human culture. And you and I were sharing just a few moments ago, just some of the, the current, not just the climate, but the current, you could say, news cycle in our country, which seems, and in our culture and our society, which is very much accusatory and finger pointing and blaming the other side. And there is there's a lack, I think, even on the part of the Christian community at large, a lack of humility to say, what part have I played in this, either intentionally or by inaction. And I was thinking of even some biblical vocabulary, which of course points to broader truths. The word for the twin words for righteousness and justice in the Old Testament, mishpat and tzedakah. And mishpat is people get what they deserve, just like justice is blind. But tzedakah has the idea that actually people are going to get chewed up.
Mm.
And so God's righteousness is God even asking us to be his partner in putting our thumb on the scales, because the scales um, are weighted against certain, against people who maybe don't have power or don't have influence or whatever. There's just, just the awareness that human society is going to be broken. And then the other notion, this is the Greek term from the New Testament, but for the idea of love love goes out and creates good. So it's active. And a lot of the debate I hear is why the other side is wrong, instead of like trying to understand the other side, whatever, or other sides.
It's
So
interesting you say that, and not to cut you off, but interesting you say that. There was an article that I penned and was actually published in Inside Publications recently. Just came out a week ago or so, and one of the responses that I received back from a reader was, "Well, I have attempted to engage in conversation on the issue of racial social injustice, racial social reconciliation, and my attempt at engagement has not been reciprocated." And it seems, to your point, that or I guess if I'm supporting your point, that I saw a T-shirt about engineers, which I am one. Um, uh, I I don't. It was to the effect, I don't have the patience to explain to you why you're wrong. It was essentially, that. It's like, well, any normal person would understand that I am right.
yeah,
And the last video cast that we did, that was and it's still, it's increased. My concern has increased, is that there is a deafening silence. Again, it makes this Old Testament again, time and time again. God, pleaded, begged, cajoled, prophet after prophet. Straighten up, fly right. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're not supposed to do. There was maybe a wink and a nod to a righteous response, but more often than not, it was like, well, obviously, God's our God, and He's not going to do anything to hurt His people. We're the choice pieces, if you will. And at a certain point, God just said, "That's it. Time. I've had enough."
yeah. I think that that you've put your finger on an issue which I think is true for many. I'll just say white evangelicals, maybe white folks in general, maybe people in general. But if we think about God, we're pretty sure that our idea of what the right thing is must be God's,
Mm-hmm.
which is an odd thing. You think,
Great.
I'm going to demand that that God's idea of justice and righteousness comports with mine. And it does sort of call into question, who's God in your view, if that's your attitude.
Right.
So that kind of I think it's true that there's something so enticing about the American story, the parts of the American story which say you deserve what you want. It's so enticing that has that I think there's good reason to think that narrative has overwritten the biblical narrative, and that has become somehow enshrined in what many Christians think is something that God owes them.
You had said weeks ago, in many ways. You're a man ahead of your time. You said weeks ago that if we had used as much energy in terms of healing, racial reconciliation, as we've done to demand and forcefully demand a physical return to a building we call the church, we'd be much further along.
I think we would be.
But
Yeah.
where it's amazing. It is. I guess, I need that engineering T-shirt. It's like, obviously you're all wrong. It's like you just need to hurry up and recognize what is it about us, the confessing Christians. Maybe it's just people in general, that we are so hyper focused. Area churches. Doggone it, you're not going to infringe on my rights. You're not going to do that. And it's like, we're talking rights. Let me talk about rights.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that focus on rights, which is not very New Testament, if you ask me. I mean, it's right. That's very clear. Give up your rights. Jesus gave up his rights. Paul asks us to give up our rights. I mean, that's what he pretty much, makes that really clear to Timothy in Acts 16:4. Within less than 20 verses from winning the debate at the Jerusalem Council that Gentiles don't need to become Jews to become Christians. We read in Acts 16:4, the very next chapter, that he says to Timothy, I'm gonna want you to be circumcised, because where we're going next, your not being circumcised would be an impediment to a higher good.
Right.
And I think one way to look at it maybe is, wow, this present moment has, like turning on lights in a darkened room, has made very clear what our true priorities are, or maybe that we have a flat view of priority, and my rights isn't, however, from whatever point of origin they issue, are just as important a consideration as the gospel asking me to have this mind in yourselves, which was in Christ Jesus, who, though he, being in the form of God, did not consider equality with God something to be taken advantage of. And when you think about like the New Testament word mercy, splengizomai, the verb, to be moved with compassion, to see a fellow human being, and to actually think it's all about your rights, how you deal with that person, as opposed to having the empathy of recognizing our common humanity. Somehow there's something about American individualism has overshadowed, like a transparency when you and I were in elementary school, and then the overhead projector, like a transparency over the original.
Correct.
That so obscured the original that it almost is unrecognizable.
So where do we go? Last time we spoke, and I so appreciate that, and looking with eager anticipation that next iteration of conversation on the I'll call it an urban-centric graduate program, seminary program that is focused on equipping women and men with the knowledge, skills, and abilities to lean into a very uncomfortable situation, one that it seems like, you know, that reaching, when you're on the merry-go-round, reaching for that proverbial brass ring, it's like it's just right outside of my grasp, but you doesn't stop kids and adults from leaning to try and to get that ring. And we're called. I mean, I'm telling you, you're the professor, but as believers, it is clear our calling is to press towards that individual and community mark of perfection, if you will. We're called, but it is a daunting task. But just because the game is hard, and I'm not trying to be flip. Um, the oh gosh, what was the game I saw yesterday? It was one team came down. It was in the basketball bubble. They came from 24 points, 20 plus points down, took the lead. They ultimately lost. It was Portland, Milwaukee. Not that that matters. Portland came back, took the lead, but ultimately lost. But they made a game of it. Yeah. They pushed, they clawed, they did what was necessary. And I would submit, even though they lost that specific game, that can't help but better position them to, in all of this preliminary, these few games up front, is so you can make the playoffs. Yeah. Get it, to continue the fight. So I don't know if the metaphor falls apart or not, but my whole point is that even though the game is hard, and sometimes it seems like we're way behind, you continue to engage, and you just continue to engage.
Yeah. So. Well, so I think you asked what's next, or even about this program we're putting together. So you used a basketball analogy. So although I finished my competitive basketball career in junior high, that was
wow. Not even high school.
No one thought that there was the promise to go any farther than that. In fact, that may have even been beyond what the promise augured. But there's practice, and then there's the game. And so when I went to seminary, that was analogous to practice. I moved away to a different town, different part of the state, hundreds of miles away, and I went to school all day long. I had class between 8 and 5, and I had a part-time job, and that was pretty much like college was, and like high school was, whatever, just way more advanced, and learned all kinds of stuff, but wasn't necessarily engaged in in any kind of ministry at the time. And then when you and I were in seminary, when I was when I was teaching, the classes were at night. They weren't during the day, and there was an awareness that people were many of them were involved in ministry to some degree, but there wasn't necessarily any institutional push to think about integration. So I would say one thing that is aiming to be different and will be different about this program, and I'll quote from Philippians 1, where Paul says, "It's my prayer that your love may abound more and more in all knowledge and all discernment." So you could say, seminary, the way I went to school, is that your knowledge would abound more and more.
Mm-hmm. Right.
In all love and all discernment, maybe. But for Paul, it's that your love may abound more and more. So that's clearly your love, your compassion, your heart like Christ would abound more and more. Now, so the knowledge should be there. So it's sapient, so it's wise in its application. The content is there, but also in all discernment. There are lots of people who are smart and know a ton of stuff about the New Testament or about something else, but aren't discerning.
Right.
They don't know when to apply it. So it's my prayer that your love may abound more and more in all knowledge and all discernment. And then he uses it's a present active participle, ta diapharon ta, and many translations don't know how to render that very well. So that I think the old RSV says that you may approve what is excellent. But what he actually writes is, it's my prayer that your love may abound more and more in all knowledge and all discernment, so that you may do the things that really matter. And that, I think, is part of what we're talking about here is, since it's learning theology, but it's also particularly New Testament, but it's learning the mind and heart of Christ and of God's intention for what God's people should be doing. But immediately, but in the context of real life ministry, and particularly in an urban setting, in the present moment. So
I think no, go ahead. Finish your thought. I'm sorry.
So what are those? So what are those principles? And so now it's not writing papers about some kind of abstract issue, but it actually is an attempt to think about, wow, what would it be like to be a disciple of Jesus? Either right when he was alive, or else immediately after his crucifixion and resurrection. What is it like to live out that gospel in a real world context, as opposed to practice?
Yeah. What would he be teaching? If it's like, well, we do have the New Testament, we have the Gospels, but I love your translation. I think that is the title for any promotional piece that tries to capture the essence of what we're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to accomplish, and I'm trying to help as much as I can, doing the things that matter. Doing the things that matter. That is like, that's it. It's just funny how you can sometimes stumble on the essential quote. The young people, and when I say young, I'm talking 20s, 30s, 40s to a certain degree, but the 20s and 30s that are leaning in to the current situation, race, culture, and the church. Yeah. If I could put words in their mouth, or if I could translate what they're trying to say, they want to do the things that matter. They want to do the things that advance the ball down the field, move the needle, put 2 points in the basket, whatever you want to say. I don't just want to show up and mark time. I just don't want to go to seminary and walk away with a degree. To what end? I want to do things that matter.
Yeah.
Well, it's incumbent on us, those that have been around the block, that have seen a thing or two, to be able to explain that in order for you to be used to your maximum potential, here are some certain things you need to accomplish, to do, to look for, to avoid, to whatever. This is what you need to do. Yep. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's a lot more. I mean, it's more open-ended.
Absolutely.
It's not going to a class, but it is. Well, it's living out dependence on the risen Lord as we seek to do His will and purpose in an actual, real world situation that's crying out for the love and compassion and wisdom of the risen Savior. So who's going to bring that to the table? Because there seem to be, we need folks who can bring it to the table.
Yeah. Doctor, I am always made better and helped with our conversations. I think I want to leave this aspect of our conversation right here. We'll continue on with our conversations, and just kind of an FYI to you and to those that will be viewing this podcast at whenever. I have the first affinity group of believers that are also in law enforcement. So 3, a woman and 2 men, CHP, city police, sheriff. We're going to have that conversation. So I invite everyone to look for that. The recording will take place in the next few days, and after we've prepared that, we'll post that on this platform, Race, Culture, and the Church. Last words, Dr. Nystrom. Last words.
Well, maybe the words of the Lord. Don't lose heart, because I have overcome the world. And a lot of it depends on, what star we're following. And this is an opportunity to see at a little bit deeper level what's been broken in our corporate body for a long time.
Yeah.
So
worth the price of admission, as they say. Any questions, anyone that has questions, please send them to us at City Church at our email address. Our general email address is info, I-N-F-O, at citychurchsac.org. Again, that's info, I-N-F-O, at citychurchsac.org. Doctor, thank you so much. And we will be recording again in a week or so, and continuing this conversation until God tells us to do otherwise.
thank you, brother.
Thank you.